The kitchen at Meridian Hall smelled like seared scallops and money, and I was standing in the middle of it in a dress the color of champagne, watching my husband take credit for my father's company. "This deal wouldn't exist without my vision," Preston said, lifting his glass toward the head table, and the room burst into applause like he'd just landed a man on the moon instead of closing a contract. My father spent 30 years building toward. I clapped too. What else was I supposed to do? My fingers were cold around the stem of my glass, and the sound of all those palms hitting together didn't feel like celebration. It felt like a verdict being read. That dinner was for the Ashgrove Tower acquisition, $110 million. The biggest deal Callaway Holdings had closed since my father died 18 months ago, and left me the company, instead of my mother, instead of my uncle, instead of anyone who'd expected it to land on me. I was 34. I'd been running boardrooms since I was 28, ever since my father first started training me. But apparently none of that mattered once Preston put on a suit and stood next to me at a podium. My mother-in-law, Lenora, sat at the center of the table in emerald silk, her wine glass raised toward her side like she was blessing it. "When my Preston gets the chance to lead, there's no stopping him," she said, loud enough for the whole table. "A company this size needs a steady hand, a man's hand." I felt that sentence settle into my chest like a stone dropped into still water. Preston's younger brother Dean sat across from me, flushed from his third glass of Cabernet. I'd hired him into the acquisitions department 6 months ago because Preston begged me to give him a shot. "I'm just saying," Dean said, gesturing with his fork. "Ever since Preston started running point on deals, Callaway's finally playing in the big leagues. No offense, Marisol, you're sharp, everybody knows that. But contractors, zoning boards, city council, that's a different animal. You need a guy who can go toe-to-toe." I set my glass down carefully. "So before Preston joined management, the company just built itself? Is that the version of events we're going with tonight?" The table went quiet for half a second too long. Dean's face stiffened. "Don't twist it, you're still the chairwoman. Nobody's forgetting that." Across from Lenora, Preston's sister Sabrina had her phone propped against the centerpiece, filming everything for her 7,000 followers, narrating under her breath about girlboss energy, in a tone that made it sound like an insult. I'd stopped expecting warmth from that side of the family a long time ago. What I hadn't stopped expecting foolishly was respect. Preston reached over and put his hand on top of mine, and to anyone watching it would have looked tender. "She knows I mean it as a compliment," he said, smiling at the table, and under the smile his thumb pressed down just a little too hard against my knuckles. A warning dressed up as affection. I'd been married to him for 6 years. I knew the difference by now. I excused myself before the second course came out, telling the table I needed the ladies' room. And I was halfway down the hallway toward the private dining wing when a waiter rounded the corner too fast, and the water pitcher in his hand tipped sideways, soaking the front of my dress from collarbone to hip. "Oh my God. I am so sorry." He grabbed a stack of cloth napkins off a service cart and started dabbing at my dress. And it was clumsy, almost aggressive, and it took me a second too long to understand that this wasn't an accident, because his hand found my wrist under the napkins and squeezed once, hard, a signal. "Ma'am, please. Let me get you somewhere private to clean up. I am so embarrassed," he said loudly for anyone listening, and steered me through a side door into the empty staff corridor behind the kitchen. The second the door clicked shut, behind us, his whole posture changed. He wasn't fumbling anymore. He looked at me dead in the eye, and underneath the black vest and bow tie, I clocked him as maybe 23, 24. "Mrs. Callaway Hale, I need 60 seconds, and then I need you to walk back out there like nothing happened. Who are you?" "My name's Theo. I've worked events here for 2 years. I wasn't supposed to hear what I heard tonight, but I did, and I think you need to hear it too." He glanced down the hallway, then back at me. 40 minutes ago I was clearing glasses in the private lounge off the east wing. Your husband and his mother were in there. They didn't know I was still in the room. I was behind the bar cart. My stomach dropped an inch. "Say it." "Your husband said," and this is close to word for word because I kept repeating it in my head so I wouldn't lose it. "Once the Ashgrove papers are signed under joint authority, the board transition documents go in next quarter, and Marisol won't even see it coming until she's already a minority shareholder in her own father's company." Theo's jaw tightened. His mother said something like, "She built this whole moment for you tonight, and she doesn't even realize it's her own exit party." The hallway tilted slightly. I put one hand flat against the wall. "There's more," Theo said, quieter now. "I can't say it all here. Somebody's going to come looking for napkins in about 90 seconds. There's a man named Roy Castellano. He does the AV and security contracting for events like this. He's been in and out of your offices for the wiring upgrade last month. I heard your husband say his name twice." I think papers are already moving. I don't know what kind. I just know it's not normal for two grown men to be that nervous about a Tuesday morning meeting. Why are you telling me this? He looked at me for a second like the question surprised him. Because 3 years ago, my mom got pushed out of her own bakery by her business partner using paperwork she never read carefully enough, and nobody warned her, and I watched what that did to her. I'm not trying to be a hero. I just couldn't stand in that room and watch it happen twice. He handed me back the damp napkins. I have to get back out there before they notice I'm gone too long. Please, just act normal tonight. If they think you know anything, they'll move faster. I walked back into that dinner with a water stain blooming across my chest like a bruise, and I smiled. And I let Preston kiss my temple and tell the table I was clumsy with my own champagne, and I laughed along with everyone. And the whole time my mind was running through every contract I'd signed in the last 2 months, trying to remember if I'd read every page, or just the summary pages. Preston's assistant always prepared for me. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to Preston listening to him breathe evenly, like a man with nothing on his conscience. And I thought about my father's voice the last time I saw him conscious. In the hospital, gripping my hand with more strength than I thought he had left. Don't ever let anyone make decisions in a room you're not in, Mari. Not even people who say they love you, especially not them. By 6 the next morning, I was in my home office with 3 cups of coffee, and every digital file related to Ashgrove pulled up across 2 monitors. I called my father's old attorney, a sharp, quiet woman named Whitney. No, not her. Someone else, someone new. A corporate litigator named Priya Anand, who'd helped my father restructure the company's bylaws a decade ago and who I trusted the way you trust someone who has no reason to lie to you. I told her everything Theo had said. She didn't gasp or panic. She just said, "Send me everything you've signed in the last 90 days. Don't sign anything else. Don't confront anyone yet." It took 11 days of quiet, careful work to understand the shape of what they were building. Preston had used a clause buried in a routine vendor services amendment, the kind of document I usually trusted my legal team to flag. The kind I'd started skimming because I had, God help me, started trusting my own husband's judgment more than my own instincts, to grant joint executive authority over a specific subsidiary entity that held 40% of Callaway Holdings' voting shares. On paper, it looked like an operational convenience. In practice, paired with 2 more documents scheduled to be signed at the next board meeting, it would have functionally split control of the company in half, with Preston holding tie-breaking authority on any vote, where Lenora's proxy shares were also in play. Roy Castellano, it turned out, wasn't just doing security wiring. He ran a small forensic data recovery business on the side, and 3 weeks earlier he'd been paid in cash to extract archived emails from my father's old server. Emails between my father and his original attorney about succession planning, the ones that made it unambiguous that I alone was meant to control voting shares. Someone wanted those emails gone before anyone went looking for them. I confronted nothing. I smiled at dinner with Lenora twice that week. I let Sabrina film me at a charity gala and post it with a caption about power couples. I let Dean walk me through a vendor presentation like he was teaching me something. And every night I sat with Priya and built a case that couldn't be argued with, talked around, or charmed away. Because charm was Preston's whole toolkit, and I wasn't going to give him a single room to use it in. The board meeting where it was supposed to happen fell on a gray Tuesday in October. Preston wore his good navy suit. Lenora wore pearls the size of marbles. I wore my father's old watch, the one with the cracked leather band I'd never had repaired because I liked that it still looked like his. When the joint authority resolution came up on the agenda, Preston stood to present it himself, smooth and confident, talking about operational efficiency and modernizing leadership structure, and I let him get all the way through it before I stood up. Before we vote, I said, I'd like to enter 3 documents into record. Priya slid copies down the table. The first is a forensic report confirming that archived correspondence belonging to my father, Arthur Callaway, was illegally extracted from company servers last month by a contractor paid in cash by my husband. The second is a transcript of a conversation recorded by hotel security cameras in the East Wing lounge of the Ashgrove signing dinner. Apparently, their audio system runs continuously for liability reasons, something Preston, ironically, insisted on installing 2 years ago. The third is a sworn statement from the original attorney who drafted my father's succession plan, confirming the exact intent of every clause. Preston has spent 6 weeks quietly reinterpreting. The room didn't applaud this time. It went dead silent, the kind of silence that has weight to it. Lenora's face went the color of the tablecloth. Preston didn't move at all, like moving would make it more real. "I'm not interested in destroying this company to punish you," I said. And I meant it. because somewhere underneath the fury there was still a tired, grieving part of me that just wanted it to be over cleanly. But I am removing both of you from any operational authority, effective immediately, and the board will be voting on formal separation from the company within the month. My legal team has already notified the district attorney's office about the data theft. What happens to you both legally is not my decision to make anymore. It's the state's. Dean, to his credit, looked sick. Sabrina had finally put her phone down. I filed for divorce 9 days later. Preston tried for about a week to play the wounded party, calling, texting, showing up outside my building once until building security asked him to leave. But the data didn't lie and the recording didn't lie. And eventually even his own mother stopped returning his calls. Because watching her own dirty laundry get aired in front of a board of 12 people had apparently cured her of wanting to be associated with any of it. I found Theo 3 weeks after the board meeting. He'd quietly left his job at the event hall, and it took me a few phone calls to track him down to a community college 2 towns over, working a second job at a coffee shop to cover tuition he was paying himself, 1 class at a time, toward an accounting degree. I didn't offer him a corner office. I'd thought about it. God knows I owed him that and more. But something my father used to say kept stopping me. A gift you didn't earn is just a debt with a different name. So instead I told him about an open analyst position in Callaway's internal compliance office, entry level, same application as anyone else, same interview panel, same scoring rubric. You don't have to do that, he said. I didn't tell you any of that for a job. I know, I said. That's exactly why you're getting a fair shot instead of a favor. He applied. He interviewed with 3 people who had no idea who he was or what he'd done for me. He got the job on his own merit on a Thursday afternoon in late November. And when he signed the offer letter, his hand was shaking, the same as it had been in that staff corridor the night he risked his job to warn me. I told him the only thing my father ever told me that actually mattered. That the most valuable thing in this business isn't a degree or a last name. It's having the spine to say something is wrong, even when the person doing the wrong thing outranks you. He nodded like he was filing it away somewhere permanent. That evening I drove out to my father's house, the one I still couldn't bring myself to sell, and let myself into his study, which I'd kept exactly the way he left it. The green banker's lamp, the cracked leather chair, the smell of old paper and pipe tobacco that had faded but never fully disappeared. I poured 2 glasses of his favorite bourbon, set one on the desk for him out of habit I couldn't break, and sat down across from his portrait above the bookshelf. It's not the version you wanted, Dad, I said out loud, to an empty room, to a man who couldn't answer, but I held on to it. I thought about that water stain blooming across my chest like a warning, about Lenora's voice insisting a company this size needed a man's hand, about Dean's condescension, and Sabrina's phone, and Preston's thumb pressing too hard into my knuckles, while he called it affection, about the 11 days of silence I had to manufacture, smiling through dinners with people I now knew had been quietly planning to erase me from my own inheritance. People ask me sometimes if I hate him. I've turned that question over more times than I can count. There's anger in there, real and earned. There's grief, too. For the marriage I thought I had. For 6 years I can't get back. For the version of myself who trusted too easily because trusting easily was never something my father taught me to be ashamed of. But hate is just another rope, and I'm done being tied to anything that man built. I don't regret being a wife. I don't regret being patient, or generous, or believing the best of people for as long as I reasonably could. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But when someone uses your patience as the very tool to take everything your father built, that's not a marriage anymore. That's a heist with a wedding ring attached. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure nobody mistakes the two again.